Hello, everybody out there. Welcome to another episode of Civil Rhetoric. You are not seeing double. This is the second time that we're going to be interviewing our guest, Jonathan, today. Today, we're going to be discussing something that I consider to be an uncomfortable conversation, although I don't think it should be. We're going to discuss our personal opinions on what masculinity as well as femininity are, and then also how that those ideas and things begin to form and create through our minds, as well as how we represent and how society as a whole views it. So it should be a fun and interesting conversation. Jonathan, for anyone who has not seen the previous episode that we have done, would you please go ahead and introduce yourself and we'll get right into the first question.
Hey, folks, my name is Jonathan Phoenix. I am a writer and podcaster out of South Carolina. I host Let Me Tell You a Story with Jonathan Phoenix, where we cover some spooky and paranormal topics. And of course, we've got a couple of books out, Through the Flames and Redcoats. And I'm really happy to be here with you today, Larry, to talk about this because I feel like you're absolutely right. This is a hot button topic that shouldn't be. And it's something that a lot of people have misunderstood and construed over time, and kind of they use it to weaponize sometimes.
Oh, definitely. I'm looking forward to getting into this. So we'll jump right into the very first question. It's very nuanced, as you can see. How would you
Mhm.
define masculinity?
So here's the thing: the way I define masculinity is I look at the classic aspects of what is masculine and try to remove the toxicity of it. Masculinity isn't going to the gym and hitting the weights. Masculinity isn't necessarily working on cars or working with your hands. Masculinity has to do something with how you carry yourself, how you approach responsibility, how you approach accountability. And that's not to say that femininity is not that, but masculinity has to do with that um, inner responsibility that you have. If you're going to be out there and you're going to be saying, "Oh, I'm the alpha male," well, then, buddy, you need to be able to back that up. And 9 times out of 10, anybody that says, "I'm the alpha male," they're not the alpha male. The alpha male is the quiet guy back there that's getting his stuff done, that's on his grind, and it's doing what he has to do without caring if anybody thinks he's a man. Um, there are aspects of masculinity that I think do stick out. More masculine things, are, rugged, beards, definitely
Yeah.
masculine. You might not pay as much attention to, details, but you're more worried about the overall, you know, and I think that's where, the line has become skewed because now everybody goes, "Oh, this isn't masculine." Like, why isn't it masculine for somebody to enjoy cooking? Gordon Ramsay is probably one of the most manliest men I've ever seen on TV. The man is fantastic in the kitchen. And if you watch any of his cooking videos and follow along and do what he tells you to do, you get some great tasting food. The man knows what he's talking about when it comes to food. But somebody, but a guy that likes to cook his family food, oh, that's not masculine. That's not masculine. But if he's out on a grill outside, oh, that's masculine. No, no. There's there are so many things that are defined by masculine or feminine that aren't masculine or feminine.
I would agree. I mean, to me, masculinity is something that you have to embody and you have to kind of imbue within yourself. I do find it funny that people always attribute it to things along the lines of gender or how someone should be because they're male or how someone should be because they're female. To me, a masculine person, or just the definition of masculinity to me is along with what you said, and also someone who's just taking responsibilities and understand that in taking a leadership role, there is just accountability that comes with that. I think accountability is a great word that you use. I believe that the word can also exist in femininity without it being something that is just exclusive to masculinity, like you mentioned before. But when you do think of masculinity, you do think of someone who is actually going to be accountable for their actions. And when you mention a person who screams they're the alpha, or now people are saying they're the sigma, when you hear the people out there that are screaming out these terms and this is who they are and they're beating their chest, that typically means that they're not. That typically means that that's somebody who's so insecure and uncomfortable within themselves, they need to tell you and tell themselves out loud so that they can believe what, the stuff that they're saying and the stuff that they're spouting. I do Oh, sorry, go for it.
No, I was gonna agree with you 100%. That's absolutely right. When they're out there and they're just screaming this out to the world, like, you don't have to scream it out to the world if you are. You know, it's kind of like when somebody does something out of the kindness of their heart. When they do it out of the kindness of their heart, they're not going to turn around and they're not going to brag about it. They might tell somebody, "Hey, you know what I did the other day that made me feel good? I did this for somebody. It made me feel good." But they're not putting it out into the world like the greatest thing in the world. Whereas opposed to, you get some of these people, they'll do something and say, "Oh, this is out of the kindness of my heart," but they've got everybody in the world looking at them. No, this is kind of to show off. Maybe it is a kind thing to do, but you're getting something out of that. It's not genuine.
I'd agree. It's funny, there was a show that I found very late, I mean, after it was already ended, called What Would You Do? And the people in those situations, the actions that they did, that meant that they were true to themselves. They had no idea they were being filmed. They were just doing what they felt and believed was right. And to me, I think that that's the true test of a person. That's the true test of, is that an action that you did because you actually felt good about it and you felt like it was the right thing to do? Were you genuinely being kind? Versus, you look on YouTube and you see a YouTuber who's pretending to be homeless and asking for money. And then when a homeless person gives them money, they then in turn say, I'm not really homeless. Here's $100, homeless person. Go enjoy your day. Look at me. Pat on the back. Yeah, that's something that I'm not really all for. I'm glad that they're giving that person $100. It just sucks that they're trivializing that person's, state in life at that point in time. And honestly, they could be causing more harm than good if that person has an addiction to drugs. And it's just like no exploration or allowing that person to be seen as a human. It's just that they're seen as a means to get clout, as the young ones like to say now. Now that we've kind of have a basic idea of how you and I kind of define masculinity, how would you say you define femininity?
So everybody thinks that femininity is the opposite of masculinity. I don't think that's true. I think the two are very much interchanged. I think it is very possible for someone to be feminine and have a lot of masculine traits. I think it's very possible for someone to be more on the masculine level but have a lot of feminine traits. I don't think that they're opposites. I don't think they're two sides of the same coin. I think they're more of an overlapping spectrum, kind of like tectonic plates, if you will. And it just depends on which way the fault went as to which plate is more prominent on a person. And whereas definitive things of feminine are, of course, beauty, attention to details. Um, you know, the the people say it's submissive, but it's not really submissive. It's more kinder and gentler. Yes,
Understanding.
masculinity isn't going to have that understanding thing because, let's face it, that is a very masculine trait to be the headstrong and rush into things. It's a bad masculine trait, but it's something that we as men have to accept, that this is something that we do that isn't always right. And when we're wrong, we need to own up and say, "Oh, crap, we really shouldn't have rushed into that."
Yeah,
But that's, again, the more think first before you act is kind of almost what I want to apply it to, because women will stand back and they will watch, and with that's the more, it's more of a, uh I don't want to say less aggressive, but it's a more analytical approach to things than men who have a more take on and run with it approach to things. And
yes.
so while people, will say this trait or that trait is feminine, long hair, or pink, or um, I don't know. I mentioned cooking earlier is a feminine career. No, it's not. But you can have a feminine approach to it. You can have a masculine approach to it. Um, you're going to get different results from the two, but neither one is necessarily bad unless you take it to the bad.
I agree. I think that's something that's kind of evident throughout life. Depending on how far you push something, it becomes dangerous. Just like if you're an American nationalist and you believe in your country and you have massive amounts of pride in it. If you're just a normal everyday person having pride in your country, that's not detrimental. However, if you're getting to the point to where, you're standing on the roof of your home or you're helping patrol the border and you're trying to kill anyone who's coming over here illegally, that's taking it a little bit too far. That's outside of your realm of, duties, for want of a better term. And I think when it comes to masculinity and femininity, they're phrases that have become, or maybe they've always been that way. They're just so gendered, and that's based on a societal view. That's not really on the definition of the word itself. Because a lot of the time, people
Exactly.
will like to attribute masculinity to, aggression, power, or even just broken down to like fighting. I do believe that masculinity encompasses that. However, a lot of the examples that are usually used are, well, back in caveman days or back when we were hunter gatherers. Well, even when we were hunter gatherers, if a mother was at home with her child and a lion came rampaging through the door, she's not going to throw the baby at the lion and say, please take the baby. She's going to fight and defend that baby.
No.
And it's like at that point, are you now saying that she's being masculine because she's fighting to defend her family? And those are things I think that kind of create these false narratives of about how and who someone should be. I think that those false narratives make it easier to control us because we're too busy fighting amongst each other about trivial topics and subjects versus having an opportunity to learn and kind of accept each other. And when it comes to I guess how it's displayed, the masculinity or the femininity, I find it interesting that femininity is when displayed through color or what side you wear an earring on, or like you had mentioned, cooking. I mean, I think it's insane that taking basic care of a home, that a man considers it, or some men consider it not masculine for basic home duties like washing clothes, or maybe you iron the clothes, or maybe you cook, or you know, all those are things that I think that are just a part of life, and to say that it's
Yeah,
specifically a woman's responsibility is irresponsible.
exactly. And you mentioned American nationalism, and I want to just throw this out there real quick. You know, it is possible to be very proud of something that you love and also be very disappointed in it. This is how parents do this all the time. So I can't understand how, when we as a country have a failing, there are people who go, "Oh, no, 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 no! We're disappointed because we did what we're." You should have that disappointment when your country doesn't meet the standards that you want it to aspire to. And so for people to just blindly um, follow and not have that, you're not really proud. You're saying you're proud, but if you were proud, you would be disappointed when you don't reach that standard, because that standard, that is your level at which you are, that is the level that you want you to be. I'm a Broncos fan. I'm proud of my Broncos when they win. But Bo, let me tell you something. I know you saw a couple of weeks ago that beating we took.
Yeah.
Oh, I was disappointed. I'm still proud of my Broncos. That's still my team. But oh, it's really hard to be a Broncos fan right now because we did not reach that level that I think we should be at. We're not hitting that standard. I'm still going to be a Broncos fan. I'm still an American fan, but I can be disappointed because it's not reaching the standard that I think it should be at. And I think with masculinity, that's a big thing is that masculinity is setting that standard and saying, this is where I need to be. And sometimes your standard might be way up here where you can't reach, and you've put it too high for yourself, and you're always disappointed in yourself because your standards are way too high. But you put that standard somewhere and you say, that's where I want to be, and that's where I'm going to go, and that's where I'm going to be proud of myself. That self pride, that's earned from within. It has nothing to do with what you say or what I say. It has to do with you looking at yourself in the mirror every day and going, yeah, I did it. I'm the man. And you can't do that without having standards and meeting standards. And when we talk about masculinity or femininity, um, those standards aren't set by society. Those standards are set by ourselves. We make those decisions within ourselves. So for you to look at somebody and go, well, masculine, doesn't really matter. If they're setting that standard to themselves and they're meeting that standard, then it is because they've taken that stance. And the same thing with femininity. One of my one of the people that I follow, she is a mechanic, and I believe that she's very feminine. But she does better work on cars, and she drift race, and she does all these things that would be considered masculine, and she's great at them. But she does them with the flair of femininity. She does them wearing pink skirts and high heels, and her hair is always done nice, and her nails. She's out there being feminine, doing this thing that is presumably only masculine and doing it better than men. And she gets a lot of hate. And I'm like, how can this should be applauded? This is somebody that's going out there setting a standard and meeting that standard, and you're hating on her. Make it make sense.
I agree. There's a it's an interesting way that we as humans have developed a holier than thou approach to the world, to where if someone is doing something that we don't do, can't do, or anything in between there, we like to just demonize it and say it's wrong or it's dumb. I'm not familiar with this young woman and the works that she does, but it sounds like someone I would be interested in and support just because of the fact that in order to make that less destigmatized, that we as people need to support those type of things. That's why when it comes to, like, female sports, and this is within the realm of masculinity and femininity, but, my wife and I, we like to go to or before we had our son, we'll do it once he's a little bit older, we go to our local colleges' softball games, and we pay and buy tickets, we pay and purchase concessions because we understand the only way to take our opinion on it being something that needs to have more funding, something that needs to have more opportunities, we have to actually go out there and support those things. So when I look at these athletes and then some and a part of my heart breaks because I was an athlete myself, it breaks that to understand that this is going to be their peak. There's no professional league of women's softball. Maybe they can at least not that I know of, maybe they can enter into the Olympic team, but then that becomes like such an even more of a heated race to get to things because it's so few spots available. And I look at some of these women, and it's like, man, these are athletes. And it's like, what are they going to do with all this after this is all over? And these are, traits that people traditionally would consider masculine. Like, she's a person that runs and dives and lays out for a ball. That's a person that's up there and, they get hurt, they're bleeding, but they still keep playing because they want their team to win. That's when, you get to the point where it's like, well, maybe she's gay, maybe she's this. It's like that has nothing to do with her sexual preferences. If she exemplifies a few masculine traits or some or all masculine traits, that doesn't affect how she views and sees the world in terms of her sexual preferences. And I do find it limiting that we do that to ourselves. We don't allow boys, like little girls get dolls, little boys get action figures when they're in reality the exact same thing. They're just wearing different clothes and have different painted on faces. But outside of that, like creating these boxes for people to exist in, we make it so much easier for someone to become depressed, for someone to feel like they're less than because they're not able to live up to society standards versus setting their own. And unfortunately, since we are society, we actually allow these standards to exist. And by not, raging against that machine, we're allowing said machine to basically Play-Doh factory and create all these copycats of each other who are just basically some variation of a masculine ideal that doesn't exist in any one person, like Andrew Tate as an example.
Yes, and you're hitting the nail on the head. So psychologically, and this is actually going to some things that I've looked into. We do put people into boxes. We have to, and that has to do with honestly, it has to do with our own fears. So when society is taking and it's going, okay, this is how this has to be. It is the group being afraid, and so they have to make this box because they don't have to fear what's in the box. So when you get something outside of the box now, all of a sudden you're afraid of it. because it's not fitting into your perfect little cell that you've made. And the problem is that this is a great big universe, a great big world. There's a great big spectrum that has been created. Whether you believe that it was created by a god, whether you believe it was created by many gods, or whether you believe it is the act of random scientific events happening billions of years ago and there's no gods involved, there is so much to it that it is impossible to fit the actual universe into little boxes. It's impossible. And when you do that, you're limiting others and you're limiting yourself. And it's one of the things I see in sports. It really, honestly, it kind of does upset me a little bit because I've seen Lisa Leslie play basketball. I think she could go to toe with some of the guys in the NBA, no problem. Now, do I think she could take Jordan on 101 in his prime? No,
No.
no. Now, maybe I'm biased. Maybe it's because Jordan was my favorite player growing up. Maybe
Same
it's
here.
because I still wish I could have been like Mike. But do I think she could take out some of these other guys? Oh, yeah. I think she'd even given Barkley a run for his money back in his prime. And Barkley was the bad boy on the court in the beginning, you know? But that's just it. She's not given a chance to go out there and shine. They're assigned to the WNBA, and the WNBA has looked lesser, but these girls run up and down the court just as hard as any man does. They shoot the ball. They do everything that a man does. They can dribble. They can pass. They can they can break your ankles in a second, but they're not given the respect they deserve. And it's like that for a lot of females who want to play in masculine sports. They get pushed off to some other thing, like the girls that wanted to play football got put in the lingerie NFL league, and I thought that was ridiculous. And the only sport where I don't see this happening is roller derby. And if you've ever seen a roller derby, you don't see very many men getting out there because the men see what happened and they go, "No, no, that's dangerous." And we like hockey. And these girls are going around on roller skates, beating the crud out of each other, running around in a circle. And you don't see a lot of men trying to do it because they know we'd get beat down. But these girls are tough as nails, and it proves that women can do anything that men can do. There's no line in the masculine and the feminine that says that there's no real line that says that no, you can't do this, no, you can't do that. That line is imaginary. It's put there by our prejudices. It's put there by our fears, and it's put there by our misunderstanding of how things really work.
So now I think we have our very first disagreement. This is gonna be interesting.
Okay.
So, for me, I agree with the fact that the gender lines are there and they're not necessarily real. However, when it comes to physical sports, like basketball as an example, Lisa Leslie, I do not think would be able to compete at the NBA level, and it's not a matter of talent because I think talent for talent, she's just as good as some of the NBA greats that have existed, but the physiological differences, the height, the size, the explosiveness, the hips being narrower, those are just advantageous to men in that regard. However, if it's skill wise, I do not think skill that she is, outmatched by any of these men. And I would even take it a little bit further with some WNBA players that I've seen. I think skill for skill, they're better than men. It's just the physicality of men is able to overtake them in that regard. So I do think that there should be separate leagues that have like a men's league and a women's league only for the fact that women deserve an opportunity to shine and display their talents. And then also, it allows for time to just catch up because since the dawn of history, men have had sports and have participated in sports, and they have been able to develop, physiologically different traits that allows them to excel at those things. I think that over time, we're going to see that women are going to become better and better physically at these sports. Like you're going to have more WNBA players that dunk and not just dunk, like barely getting up there, tiptoe dunk, I mean, actually getting up there and tomahawking balls. Like I remember when Lisa Leslie used to dunk before she was in the WNBA, like in the US Olympic Games. She'd go up and dunk, and she was like one of the only women that were doing that. But now as we go through time, we've noticed that you have more and more women doing that, and that's because of the they've been able to participate, they've been able to get coaching earlier. It's become less stigmatized that they wanna participate in basketball, and I think that that's a good thing. The only difference, I guess I have with that is when you have, transgender athletes and, specifically a transgender female participating in female sports. I do believe that that is an encroachment of men coming into female sports, and I'm not saying that a transgender or a trans woman is a man. I'm just saying that the physiological differences that they have been allowed to develop throughout time give them certain advantages against women when it comes to playing physical sports. If it's something that's mental or something that's strategic, I think that at that point, it's fair game. If it's chess, if it's pool, if it's even bowling, I mean, to an extent, that's something I could see being, whoever the best player is the best player because my wife kicks my ass every time that we bowl. I suck at bowling. She destroys me at bowling, and I have about 100 pounds on her. So like, I 100% agree in regard to that gender line being, something that's imaginary, but I do think we need the separation, and I think that we need to in order to encourage more money to be placed into these things, we as a people need to be in more participation. Like, I haven't had cable for 9 years, no, 11 years now, I haven't had cable, but I still consume WNBA content, and I don't even do it while paying attention to it. I just understand that for the algorithm, the more views that are recorded, the more things that are there, it ends up being seen as, okay, they are increasing their fan base. They do have a fan base. There needs to be more money placed into these things. But this is actually going to lead me to hear your rebuttal, but then also to hear how do you feel about I guess the sports pay gap or the sports wage gap when it comes to things along those lines.
Oh, yeah. I don't want to get into. We'll get into the wage gap, but let me rebut to that for a minute because I understand what you're saying with the physiological, but it's kind of along the lines of taking a good V8 and a really good four cylinder and putting them on the line and trying to figure out which one is going to win. Now, understand one's got twice as much horsepower, it's twice as big, it's bulky, and that four cylinder, it's got a little tiny engine. It's got half the engine of the eight cylinder, but it's also a lot lighter. It's a lot faster. It's going to get off of that line faster. And if it's a front wheel drive, it's going to take corners differently. And so when you bring up the physiologically, yes, there are physiological differences, but in a lot of cases, those differences could be what make the female athletes much better than the male athletes in some aspects and much worse. Now, are there games where I think it is solely just a male? It's not fair to put males and females against each other. Kind of. I don't think it's fair to take 20 150-pound females and put them on an offensive line against 20 350-pound males. I don't think that's right on a football game on a football field. But if you go pound for pound, if you go pound for pound, put them lined up pound for pound, and you don't have this massive double the size gap, then as far as the physiological differences, I think those cancel each other out. If you look at mixed martial arts, sometimes if you look at even in wrestling, we had China back in the '90s, the eighth wonder of the world. This woman came out there, and there were so many guys that just because of how big and how bulky and how tough she was, that's a dude. China could take on anyone that got in that ring. I have no doubt she could have won a world championship title. They wouldn't let her because she was a woman, but she had developed her body to match these guys pound for pound. She was able to go move for move in the ring with anybody, and she showed it many times. She was out there beating up dudes when she first came out. This big, bulky bodyguard of a woman. And everybody was like, what in the hell? Janie Lawler, God rest her soul, because she had such a hard time after that because she literally um, was just looked down upon by everybody for becoming good at what they do. And, are there physiological differences in most cases? Yes. Generally, men are bigger. They're bigger. They've got more muscles. Our bodies actually have more padding. Why that is, you can throw it in many different ways. Oh, we're supposed to be tough. We're supposed to take the hits. Oh, maybe it's because we piss women off so much we're supposed to sleep alone, and women get to cuddle up with the kids or whatever, and we don't have anybody to share body warmth with because we were a-holes. Who knows? Um, but the one thing is that for every advantage one has, there is a disadvantage, and that disadvantage can be exploited by the advantages of the other. So when you go into those physiological differences, and now um, the whole transports thing, I don't like to get into because I don't know. And the reason I say I don't know is because, and I'm going to out myself here, I have a trans child, and I am a parent of a trans individual, and he is very happy in his skin. Uh, do I think it would be fair for him to go and play football with a whole bunch of, like I said, 300-pound guys? I don't know. But would I stand in his way to stop him? No. And I think that's the thing is that, remember how I said earlier, standards. We set standards. So if you put a 300-pound man out there and you put a woman who's 250, 6'4", she's bulked out like China, and she can take that 300-pound man and push him down the field, then I think give that woman a shirt, give that woman a set of pads, give her a helmet, put her on the field, let her play. I think that if you can stand in the game, I don't care if it's synchronized swimming, I don't care if it's ballet. If you've seen ballet dancers, them chicks do some things I can't believe any man could do. But if that man can get out there and do it, give that man his freaking slippers, let him get on the stage and let him dance to Tchaikovsky and entertain people. There is no line. The line should not be designed pink or blue. The line should not be designed men or women. The line should be designed can you or can't you? If you can meet this standard, have at it. If you can't meet this standard, or if you exceed this level, or if you're this, well, then you have to go over here to here. You have to go because you can't do this safely. And so when it comes to the idea of transgenders in sports, if you take somebody and they're capable of doing X, Y, and Z, and you remove gender, you remove everything else, and you say, okay, this person plays at this level, and these people are playing at this level. So it is fair to take this player and put them in here. Then I think, yes, that's right. But if you have a person, you've got a team that's playing at ABC and this guy plays at EFG, well, then it's not fair to put them over here. Now you have to put them over here with EFG players. And I think that is where we need to start. That's where we need to start looking, because that's where logic falls in. We start throwing away the prejudices, and we start looking at what an individual can do. Um, if we're looking at an individual's capabilities and we're saying, okay, realistically, this is where you're at. You're not over here. So we can't put you over here because that's what over here is. You have to be over here. But then we take that individual and we accept, okay, this person is here. Now, if that person wants to get to this level or wants to get it to a higher level, that person's going to have to work. But we have to accept them at this level because that's where they're at. And it doesn't matter if it's a female trying to be in a men's game, a man trying to be in a woman's game. It doesn't matter if it's a transgender trying to be in either. If they are at that level, if that's where they can be, if that's where they are, then I think allowing that um, is only the way that we can progress to become a better society. As long as we keep throwing these lines up, as long as we keep putting limits on what people can and can't do, we're going to be a limited society. If, um, every time that we've smashed through a wall where there's been a limit, society has gotten better. Um, Slavery in the 1800s. We broke down slavery, and our country got better. Women's rights in the 1920s. We started letting women have a voice, and our country started to get better. The civil rights movement of the 1960s. God, that was a bloody battle. But when we got through it, and it's not fixed yet. Trust me, I know. Um, and I hate it because I see my friends suffering, and there's nothing I can really do, and I can't even relate because I don't go through it. But it's not better. But the country has improved. Every time we break down these barriers and we start going, you know what? We're going to hold people accountable not for this, and this, but for if they can meet the standard. And we're going to hold everybody to this standard. Then society improves. It's all about standards.
I agree. Now, one thing I would like to say before I rebut is number one, I am an old school WWF fan, not the WWE fan. So you bringing up China is like right in my wheelhouse. I love the fact that you gave her a shout out. I loved her as an athlete. I used to think it was kind of funny, even as a young boy, that people would say that it was a man, or could it be a man? Could it not be a man? I always thought that that was funny because China was China. The entire point of her character was that because she was special. She was this big, bulk, hulking woman who was the enforcer for Shawn Michaels, whom she was larger than. So I
Oh my
100%
God, much
agree
larger
with
than.
that. Much larger than that. So, like, and also I would like to give her a definite rest in peace. It's unfortunate that the trials and tribulations throughout her life led her to that ultimate outcome. But I do think that, just as a little bit of a sidebar, that if anyone knows anyone out there and they're not necessarily going with the flow or following along with the crowd and they might seem a little distant. I think it's okay to just let them know that they're okay. I think that it's okay to let them know that someone does see them and that they do matter. And on top of that, the second thing I want to say is I'm super happy that your child, your son, has the opportunity to grow up in a home with you as their father, because someone being as accepting as that, it should be the norm, but at least in my personal experiences, that is not typically the norm. So I'm extremely happy for your child. I am extremely happy for your child. And now with that said, I'm gonna rebut the things that I did hear from you that I kind of picked out. Now
Okay.
the V8 versus the four-cylinder example. I do like cars myself. And the reason why I think that it's a good and apt example is because if it's a, let's say, a drag race, if it's a stock V8 versus a stock four-cylinder. Let's even say it's a mildly, tuned four-cylinder, something that's great in handling and all those lines, it's very agile. If it's just a straight race, straight line, the V8 is going to win, the base stock general V8, and that's just because that the engine, although it's bigger and heavier, does allow for better displacement and power and torque to be generated. Now, if
Hmm.
they're both equally modded vehicles, like if you took $10,000 and you put it into a four-cylinder, and you took $10,000 and you put it into a V8, that V8 is still gonna win because if it's, apples to apples comparison on a straight line, that V8 is built for that type of performance, and I think that's how it kind of represents in sports. A woman that is, let's see, right now I'm about 210 right now. A woman that plays softball, as an example, and I'm almost 40. So let's say that she's
Hmm.
young, she's 19 to 25, like prime of her physical attributes. A woman who is my size is still not gonna be able to throw the ball as hard as I do or hit the ball as hard as I do, even though that there is technique and skill involved in that, and it's just because my muscle fibers are denser, they're bigger, the fast twitch muscles are more available. So even at the same size, I'm gonna be quicker and faster than her, simply because of the fact that my body is physiologically designed to be that way. Now, on an apples to apples comparison in terms of skill, I do know that no professional sport does have a restriction against women being allowed to play as long as they qualify. I just think that the reason why we need to have the two different leagues is because it's a very rare occurrence that a woman does qualify to participate and play in a men's league at the skill level of a man, because I'm 100% all for parity. If someone can do it, let them do it, and I think it should be that way. However, when you come into if that removes women's sports, that limits and takes away opportunities from women because they're not having a time to develop something that men have had, centuries of a head start on. I do think that it is possible that we can get to a time to where we could dissolve, the 2 different leagues or 2 different, types of competition. I just think that it's gonna be a while to get there because physiologically, women would have to quote unquote "catch up." I do also believe that women and men are relatively equal when like, in terms of rights, 100% equal in terms of human rights. However, physiologically, the differences are like, the man being the V8 and the woman being the four-cylinder. It's imagine a V8 that has a four-cylinder body and is capable of handling and moving faster than the four-cylinder because it has more engine displacement. That's kind of I think, a more of an accurate example of it when it comes to men and women, in my opinion, on sports. When it comes to things of thinking or things of politics and that nature, I think it's 100% equal and made the best person win. It's just that when it comes to like a physical sport like basketball, baseball, combat sports like MMA or boxing, I do think that there needs to be a separation because even a boxer like Clarissa Shields, her fighting, I think it was Keith Thurman that was a match they were talking about. They're about the same size, and she more than likely, and I'm gonna say that because she's one of the best technical boxers I've ever seen. She more than likely has a greater skill tree than he does. However, every 5 times that she hits him, if he hits her once, you know, his 1 punch is gonna cause more devastation than her 5 punches, and it's just because he's a and they're about the same size. It's just the way that the muscle fibers react and, are connected to our brains and systems. I do think that women need to have, they need to have the opportunity to compete amongst themselves, and, for the rare few that are able to compete on the at the scale of a man, I think they should be allowed to. Like, when I was younger and I played Little League, uh, girls were allowed to participate in Little League with boys, it was intergender. The only difference was that girls were able to play for an additional year in terms of age, and there was no restriction on that for them to play and even going to all-stars and things like that. So I think that that helped out, but once
Mhm.
high school excuse me, once junior high came and, when boys had that because we have 17 times, the amount typically, we have 17 times the amount of testosterone in our bodies, versus women, that's when the physical just kind of overtook, and then now the competition is no longer equitable or fair because these women just on a physical level, most women, were not able to compete. But if a woman can compete, I think that they should be allowed, and I believe they are allowed. I'm not 100% sure though, but I do believe they are allowed to participate at the highest level. And if it's, apples to apples and you're lining up a 300-pound male lineman and a 300-pound female lineman, and she's capable of pushing that male lineman down the line, down the field to create gaps and whatnot, then that woman should be allowed to participate. But if you take that 300-pound male lineman and you allow him to participate in women's football, let's not even call that lingerie league crap. I don't know why they did that to people. I think that's supremely unfortunate. But if it wasn't
It's attacking the caveman. That's what it is.
yeah, pretty much, it's like, "Hey, you guys like this, this'll make you want to watch." And I mean, I think that
Get the caveman out.
yeah, and I think that that's super, super unfortunate for us as a society, that
Mhm.
we're still doing that. Even going back to the WWF, when they used to have the women's title and they had the lingerie matches, and then you had someone like a Trish Stratus who came out and was like, "No, I'm not just a pretty face. I'm actually a hell of an athlete." And I do believe that she is still celebrated to this day because of that. She was an amazing athlete versus like a Sable who was there to say, "Hey, I'm eye candy, and I can't really do any moves. My moveset's small, as well as, I'm gonna be a person that's just kinda there to maybe I'll grab a leg to pull someone off for a 3 count, or I'll distract the referee or something like that. So I do believe that there are levels and that there are differences. However, the similarities are, I think that we all need to make sure that if we have women's sports, we need to be, promoting them and propping them up, and it's simply just by being a consumer of that product, because America, for all of its amazingness and all of its faults, if it makes money, they're gonna pump resources into it, and I think the only way to get me more resources into these things is going to be from people like yourself, myself, as well as the rest of the world just actually consuming female product.
Okay. So I like what you said there, and I get where you're coming from, and I agree on some levels. But like you said, this is when we're kind of having some differing opinions, and I want to make sure I re-clarify some things.
Okay.
I'm not saying that we need to get rid of women's sports. And in fact, I think we do need women's sports because we need to bring young girls and women up and let them know that, hey, it's okay to do this. It's okay to be a part of this. What I'm saying is that we have in every sport in the world, we have this top tier level of comparison. As the macho man would say, it's where the cream rises.
Correct.
Um, it's we've been doing WWF. I had to throw it in there. It's that top tier NBA, MLB, NHL, um, NFL. We have these top tier levels, and we say, well, these are the best athletes in the world. We pay them millions of dollars to watch them perform, and you know, we don't pay these other athletes who have skills. Maybe they're developing skills. Maybe they didn't have all the bonuses. I guarantee you there are women that are playing basketball that they didn't have parents that were shoving them on the court at 4 years old. They picked that ball up sometime during their life and realized they enjoyed the game, and they just practiced and spent time and worked really hard to get to where they are, and we're not paying them any attention. Whereas males, even me, unfortunately, as a parent, like I said, I have a trans son, and I have my older son, and I realized recently that when he was coming up, before my trans son came out, I spent more time putting him into sports. We were getting him in soccer and basketball. I coached his basketball team because I was so into that, and I just didn't really look for sports for my younger child because it wasn't what they were supposed to be into. I made that mistake, and as a father, that was one of my failings. I think um, is that I didn't remove my own prejudices at that point in time, and this was years ago. This was a while back, but I didn't remove my own prejudices, and I didn't offer them the opportunities that I offered the other child. And what was the difference? They were both my children, and granted, I gave them opportunities, but they were different opportunities. I pushed them towards different things, and I pushed the other one towards different things. And he's becoming a voice actor, and he likes video games and Dungeons and Dragons, and
Cool.
hasn't played a sport in years. But when he was young, oh man, I was on the soccer field every season. I was assistant coach. I joined the YMCA to help coach because oh yeah, he's going to be a soccer player. And there was all this gung ho team spirit about him being out there in sports, and it wasn't even something he really wanted to do. Um, and and that's where one of the biggest differences as a society that we do. And then we have this top tier. We make this uh, godlike Olympics area where we put these performers and we hold them all up there, and then we look at somebody and we go, well, you can't get up there. You can't get up there because you were born different than they were. And I don't think that's right. I think that there is every chance that a woman could make it physically and with skill to get up to those top tiers. Now, I'm not saying that there doesn't still need to be a WNBA and there doesn't still need to be this, but if we're going to say that the WNBA is under the NBA and then the NBA is top tier, then it should be possible for a woman to go from one to the other and compete and show that she's top tier too. And like you said, you mentioned WWE. You mentioned how they did the lingerie matches and all of that stuff, and you mentioned Sable. But there were also your Trish Stratuses, your Litas,
Jacqueline.
um, Jacqueline. There were real athletes. And even if we go back even further, even when we go back to oh God, I can't remember her name now, and
Moolah,
she had a school here,
the fabulous
the
Moolah.
Fabulous
Yeah,
Moolah, the Fabulous Moolah. Now she was actually getting in the ring with men back in the day. She was doing what she was doing, the exact thing that we talked about. Um, here now. That's why she was called the Fabulous Moolah, because she has even body slammed um, Chief Chief
Yeah,
Maivia.
I couldn't think of his name, but I know
She
who you
had
were
body
talking about.
slammed Chief Maivia. Rocky Maivia's, I mean, Dwayne the Rock Johnson's grandfather. This woman body slammed him one time. And then she trained wrestlers for years. She worked with Hulk Hogan. She worked with these guys. She trained them. And a lot of them say that her training was a lot harder than anybody else's training. Um, and she was one of the more famous trainers of professional wrestlers back in the day, but she's not recognized for that. She's recognized for being the woman of wrestling. She was the Fabulous Moolah. She was a woman. And I don't think that's fair. I think that it is possible for a woman to go out there to reach the top level and to be on the same pillar with the men athletes that we have, that we've put on this pillar. We put them on this pedestal, and then we look at women and we say, oh, you can't get up there unless you go up this ladder over here. No, I think that you can climb any way you want to if you have the skill, if you have the ability, if you're willing to put into work. And like you said, you talked about a stock V8 versus a four cylinder. But what about somebody that goes up against a stock V8 and they've put $20,000 into that four cylinder? And what about a V8? And what if we took two V8s out there, but one's in a four cylinder body? You change, we're thinking stock, and I get why you're thinking stock, and you're right when it comes to stock. You're right on the average everyday person, but this world is built out of the unaverage, out of the exceptional.
Agreed.
And what we have to do is we have to be more open to admitting, okay, hey, this person is exceptional. It doesn't matter where they were born. It doesn't matter what they were born. It doesn't matter who they were born. They meet this level of standard that we've put, and we need to give them the chance to shine because they could make things better. And until we get that, out of the mindset, because you're right, 10 times out of 10, pound for pound, you know, the fight is going to go one way. That's why we have odds. That's why we have statistics, because we know how the math works. But there are outliers. There are aspects that we don't know. There are things that we can't predict. And when that outlier comes along, when the guy pulls up with the what is it? I think it's an RX-7, and says, "Oh yeah, it's only got three cylinders," and you've got your souped up V8, and you're like, "Oh, you're not going to do anything to me," and then that freaking Japanese airplane engine dogs out your eight-cylinder and leaves you sitting at the line, wondering what the heck just happened. What are you going to do? You're going to go,
For me,
and that's the,
I'm a guy that give him the thumbs up. It's like, "Man, that's awesome." You know?
you know, there are, and a lot of people are going to be like, what's a three-cylinder engine? Look it up. It is one of the most powerful engines out there. They pulled it off of the Japanese Zeros and put it into a car, and the frickin' thing will go. Um, it's also impossible to fix.
Yeah, those rotary engines are
Take it from a guy who's been trained in mechanics. You can't fix the frickin' things.
yeah, those rotary engines, it's like they're one and done, but I agree. Like, I mean, like, with the correct application, that car is damn near unbeatable. It's
But
also even like, I know we're sidebarring with cars, but even, like, the Supras, the old Supras where they'd roll up to, and I've seen countless videos, and I've been a part of a couple. They roll up to a race night, and you have people making fun of it because, they got their Hemis, their big boy V8s with work done to them, and these Supras were still blowing
yeah,
him out of the water. And granted, that's a six-cylinder engine, but it just goes to show that, like, people just don't know, and that a Supra is an exceptional vehicle, and because it's exceptional, it should be allowed to compete with any and everyone. And I do feel that when it comes to women, it should be exactly the same. The only reason I think we had the miscommunication before is my fear is that if you say, "Okay, we're gonna open it up to everyone," that in turn creates I guess, an avenue for someone who is not necessarily on board with what we're discussing and saying, well, if you're going to have women over here taking the positions from men, then I do believe that men should be able to go and enroll in their sports and take positions for them. And that's where I get into the unfairness. And I do agree that that Olympian, pedestal that we placed like male athletes on, like the NBA, the NFL, the NHL, as well as the MLB. I do think that there just needs to be an equivalent for women because when you think about like the gods of Olympus, they all set up on the Mount of Olympus. They didn't sit, the women
Exactly.
were down here and the men were up here. I think it just needs to be open for both. And in order for that to actually come to pass, we have to participate in putting eyeballs on those things. Like, and that's why my wife and I would go to those softball games. That's why, like, and honestly, like, I love MMA. Female MMA fights are just because women have more to prove. They're just more exciting fights. Like, let's just be honest. Those fights, they bang. It's like super
You know,
exciting.
they really are. And honestly, when you look at and granted, as you said, WWF fan, um, when the WWE came along and when WCW went away, I kind of drifted out of it. I would say that I grew up, but it changed. I was Attitude Era.
Same here.
Okay, I was Stone Cold. I was The Rock. I was Degeneration X. I was watching Lita do all kinds of crazy moves off. I was watching Trish Stratus Bronco busting people. I was watching the real rough and tumble WWF back in the day. Um, but we've been talking about these sports, and granted, wrestling is sports entertainment. But if you see some of the performers now, the female performers now that they have, their athleticism, their movements, their power. It's all getting up there. I'm not going to be surprised we won't have, some internet video floating around soon of a Hell in a Cell between Ronda Rousey and
Um,
Charlotte Flair, where Charlotte throws Ronda off the top of the cell through a table at some point in time soon. Recreating the Undertaker Mankind of the 1990s, where we all held our breath and thought we just watched mankind
yeah,
die.
yeah.
Mick Foley just died. Oh, we get back up. Oh, he's going back in
Yeah,
there.
I love when they take him out on the
Oh,
stretcher, and then he actually gets off the stretcher and comes back. I mean, that to me, like, anytime that I feel like I'm about to give something up, that does play in my head. Like, that was something that I consider that, like, life-changing seeing that. And even if it was according to script or not according to script, because it's hard to tell with kayfabe, like, there's no amount of respect that I think is too much for that man, Mick Foley. And I feel the same way for someone like China, and I feel the same way for female athletes because I do understand that they're actually going against the grain, and in doing so, they're making larger sacrifices, not because they personally need to make those sacrifices, but because there's like an idea that society forces on them that makes them have to sacrifice. Like they're sacrificing, and I use this in air quotes, their femininity. They're sacrificing, opportunities and options that are typically seen as feminine. These are things that society is doing to them when they're just doing something that they love, which I think should be the same for men. If a man wants to go into ballet. Like I remember when I was a kid, my family had asked me, "Is like, do you want to do ballet?" Because a friend who was female was doing ballet, and I was like, "No, that's gay," because I didn't know any better. And now looking back at it, I was like, man, my balance would have been so much better. My coordination would have been so much better. That would have helped me in other sports. But because I had this stigma and the stereotype, and I was a child, I had no ability to actually expand my mind and like look into the benefits that it could propose. And ballerinas are some of the greatest athletes on the planet, but they're not recognized
exactly.
as it. They're not recognized as it because we have this idea that
No.
athleticism is only based on a couple of attributes, when in reality, it's anyone that can do the exceptional. And a ballerina on a day-to-day basis, they practice in the exceptional. Like try to stand on your toes, you
Yes.
know? Like
If you ever actually meet any professional ballerinas and you actually go to when they're practicing and everything, you'll find that a lot of them uh, are spending more time bandaging their feet than anything else because they're actually bleeding to train. They're bleeding
yes,
to train for this. They're bleeding to teach their bodies to do these things, to move on their tiptoes because our bodies are not designed for that.
correct.
And that is an example of the exceptional. You're absolutely right. And this has been the point that I think I'm trying to make is that masculinity and femininity aren't the two different sides. They're overlaid, and it is possible for someone to be in a masculine field, doing something very masculine, still be feminine at the same time. And going back to Janie Lawler, China, um, when she got done with the WWF, she had the hardest time being recognized as feminine because she had been so masculine and in that man's world. She had such a hard time for people to recognize her feminine side. And I think that's what drove her to the drug use. And I think that's what drove her to, because they couldn't accept that she could be both, that she could do this thing and still be this feminine beauty at the same time. And she was a beautiful person and she was a beautiful woman. And people just judged her and pushed her aside. And she was pushed away from so many things and pushed into so many bad decisions that led to her untimely death, um, because of how we view things as a society. So, yeah, it's okay to have the, okay, guys over here, girls over here. It is okay to have that. It is okay to say that, this is something that girls like more. But what it's not okay to say is that there is a problem with a girl coming over here and liking what the boys are doing, or a boy coming over here and liking what the girls are doing. There shouldn't be, it shouldn't be, a problem. And when we get into the professional level, if we're going to have a top tier and say this is the best of the best of the best, then anybody that can be that good should be able to compete. Because if they're the best of the best of the best, then they're going to run with the best of the best of the best. And there should not be any lines or exceptions. If somebody goes out there tomorrow, if a woman goes out there tomorrow and picks up Brock Lesnar and slams him around like a rag doll, then she should be the champ. I'm just saying, you know, it shouldn't be, well, she's a woman, she can't. No, no. If she can do the job, then give her the job. That line shouldn't be there. If a man can go into a kitchen and bake the best cake in the world, don't tell him he can't be a baker,
Agreed.
because that's feminine. I like to bake. I'm not the best baker in the world. I'm not even the best baker in my family. Um, but don't tell me I can't, because it's a feminine task. Don't tell me this is feminine or that's feminine. It's not. I may like to clean. Well, I don't like to clean, but if I did, it's not feminine to clean. Hell, and some of the most masculine things you can do is take care of your home, I
Yes.
think,
Yes.
because if you're taking care of your home, you're taking responsibility and accountability. It's very masculine. Oh, I keep my place nice and neat and clean and da 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 da. That's pretty cool, dude. You know why that's pretty cool? Because it's accepting responsibility and being accountable for yourself.
I agree.
I have to admit, I'm not the neatest person. I'm not, but I don't think that I fortunately I have a fiance that does have the ability to keep things clean and get up the trash and do all of that. And, she's able to pick up the slack where I'm at, but it's not that I believe that that's her job. She just happens to be better than I am at it. You know, if I were better than she was at it, which I do most of the cooking, not to say that I'm better, but I just do most of the cooking because I like to cook, doesn't mean that it's a man's job or a woman's job. It just means that these are the things that we're better at. And by acknowledging that, hey, I'm better at this, I'm going to take this weight and I'm going to carry this load. You're better at this. You take this weight, you carry this load, and then helping each other. That's how we get through in society.
That I 100% agree with. The fact that well, I wouldn't say us, you and I personally, but we as a society and as a culture, we kind of gender the jobs around the home as if that matters to anyone. To me, like, I also well, not as much now, my wife does predominantly most of the cooking now, but before I did about 90 to 95% of the cooking, and then I also did a predominant amount of the cleaning because I'm kind of a neat freak, and we don't use traditional products like 409 or Windex. I make all of our cleaning products, and I make all of our soap. I make all of our candles. These are things that are seen as traditionally, they're hobbies and they're seen as traditionally feminine hobbies, but I love doing these things, and they're things that I'm
And
always going to do.
And see, that's freaking awesome that you do that. And to be honest, I have a friend who is a woman who does the same thing, but I don't view that as feminine. I just view that as awesome. She's offered to make soap for me before, and I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? Yeah. Um, because to be able to do that, have that hobby, that's awesome. You know, it's work. Making something shouldn't be considered one or the other. It's just something that you enjoy doing and you have fun doing. Who cares whether it's feminine or masculine? Enjoy yourself.
Agreed, and I think for myself, like, going through, like, years of therapy and being able to kinda break that hold that I allowed society to place me in, that box that they allowed society to put me in, and you mentioned cell earlier today, which I think is the best way to exemplify it. It's like allowing myself to remain locked in that cell did nothing but create incongruencies in myself. It made me, antisocial. It made me angry, and I'm not even sure what I was angry about, but it's because I was limiting myself, and removing those limiters, removing those lines, removing those segregations of gender, and taking masculinity and femininity, understand that all those things exist in all of us, and in differing and varying degrees. That allowed me to become more of an open person, to become more of a whole person, I would like to say. And I think that that's something that can help others, because if you're constantly, like, in terms of the way society, for most in part, kind of view gay men. They view gay men as less than man, as less than masculine. When for myself, and then anytime someone who was in the closet, so to speak, they come out, they're like, "Oh, I never knew. Who would have thought?" It's like, well, why would you think? It doesn't change who they are as a person. It just changes who they like to sleep with or who they fall in love with. That has nothing to do with anything else that they do in their life outside of in their own personal business. And I think that once we can get to remove those things and just allow people to be people, as long as they're not breaking any laws or hurting anyone, then we should just allow that and be good with it. Because I think our world, our society, especially American society, being at the forefront of this, it just allows us to become better, faster, quicker, sooner. Because it's not like it really harms anyone or anything. I mean, it doesn't harm me if someone is gay or trans or anything in between. That doesn't harm me at all. That's their lifestyle. If that's how they choose to exist and be in their life, they should be allowed to do so, because they're human. And human beings have certain inalienable rights, especially in this country.
Hmm. You know, with what you said and talking about the boxes and talking about when we get rid of that, there is a scene from a Mel Brooks movie, and I think Mel Brooks
Yes.
is
Yeah.
a modern genius that we don't give enough credit to. I feel like it should be required for everybody to watch a Mel Brooks film. At least, watch them all. They need to watch them all. It just needs to be when you get into high school. We're going to start you off with Blazing Saddle, and we'll finish you off with
Yeah.
Dracula Dead and Loving It. But we're going to go to Robin Hood Men in Tights, and we're going to go to the end of the movie. And there is a scene where, after everything that's going on, Robin appoints Achu as, son of Usnease, played by Dave Chappelle, no less,
Yes.
as the sheriff of Nottingham, replacing the old sheriff of Nottingham, who was, well, we all know, a horrible person. And everybody immediately screams, "A black sheriff!"
I love that
And
callback.
Blinken is standing there. Remember, and of course, Chappelle's line was absolutely true. It worked in Blazing Saddles.
Yes.
It worked really well in Blazing Saddles.
Yes.
But Blinken, who has been spent the entire movie with that shoe, has been around him, has spent time with him, goes, "He's black?" And I think that is
Yeah.
how we have to look at everything in society. We need to stop viewing people as white or black. When somebody says that, we need to be surprised. Wait, he's black? Really? Didn't know that. I just knew that he was a person. You know, that's they're a chick, really? I didn't know that. They're gay, really? Didn't know that. I just know them as a person. That explains why they have a boyfriend. That explains why they have a girlfriend. You know what? That explains why they're hanging out with aliens all the time. Um,
Yeah.
because these things aren't as important as the qualities and characteristics that people, the other qualities and characteristics that people have, and we get so dug up in these little outer things that really have no effect on our own personal lives, that we cut out so much by it. Um, and I think that's really, what we need to start seeing the world more as that, more as who cares, wow, that's never knew. That didn't change who that person was that they were gay. That doesn't change who that person is that they're trans. That doesn't change who that person is that they're black. That doesn't change who that person is that they're white. That person should be the same person regardless of all of those aspects. You know, if we weren't having a video conversation, we would still have the same respect for each other based on our intellects, based on our opinions, based on the dialogue that we've carried out. And that should be how it is across the board. Whether whether I was a father to multiple kids, whether you were approaching 40, whether I was white, whether you were black, it doesn't matter. What matters is the character and quality of the person that you are. And when we start looking at that and stop looking at every little minuscule thing, we're going to start getting better as a society.
I agree, and I know we're coming up on it here, but one thing I do wanna throw out there is I am gonna end up doing a discussion on race as well, and if you're up for it, man, I'd love to have you back, like, this has been
Oh,
fun.
man. Let's do it, man. Because let's do it. I grew up. Yeah, let's do it. Because yeah, the race issues. Just yeah, we'll do that too. We'll definitely have that conversation. I have no problem. These uncomfortable conversations we're having, they're just getting far and few too many.
I agree. The good thing though is, like, doing things like this is it just expands and opens up, and, one thing I'll even go over in closing is there was a YouTuber who recently, I think Gideon, something like that, he, went to a WNBA game, got some front row tickets, and he got kicked out because he had his, like, pajamas on and he was trying to go to sleep, like, acting like it was that boring, basically,
Uh,
and the sad part about that is the reason that that is a joke is the most coverage that the media provided to the WNBA was on that versus the actual play of the people in the game. And that I think is a part of that issue. It's when you focus so much on a here's a negative thing that occurred versus like, you know what, now that we have your attention and your eyes, let's show some highlights and greatness that these athletes are performing on the court. Instead of taking that opportunity, they allowed it to just kind of degenerate into negativity. And I think the only way to cause that change is going to be by having supportive parents like yourself with whatever their child wants to do. And well, whatever their child wants to do within the means of, just logic, and then also just basically putting eyeballs on it, putting attention to it, and just saying, "Hey, I believe that a female can compete. I believe that a female is not being considered, non-feminine if she decides to enroll into a sport that's, contact." Like Ronda Rousey as an example, to think that she's not feminine is crazy. She's a gorgeous woman, and I think that,
yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
and I think her abilities when it comes to, like, defending herself and her family, it makes her even better looking because to me, someone that is more capable versus less capable should be celebrated, and being an exception should not be something that someone's denigrated for, but it should be something that someone is celebrated for, and I believe it should be
Yes.
whether they're masculine or feminine or and again, anything in between.
You know, I agree 100%. Whether or not, just I guess because we're going to be wrapping it up. Whether or not a person fits into your little box or not should not matter. If they have the character, if they have the skills, if they have the ability, you know, let the guy go in the kitchen and cook. Let the boy do ballet. Let him be out there strutting his stuff. Um, some of the greatest, most known dancers that we talk about were men. Fred Astaire, Michael Jackson,
Yes.
um, Twitch. Twitch. I don't know if you recognize who I'm talking
The
about, but he was
pop
from
rock
So You
guy.
Think You Can Dance.
Yeah, the yeah.
He is he's he was legendary on the dance floor. These guys were able to step into that and still keep their masculinity, because when you get down to the bottom of the day, masculine and feminine has to do with how you carry yourself, not the actions that you do. masculine and feminine is a inside thing, not an outside thing, and we need to stop applying these inside things to outside people and apply them more to ourselves. If you have a child, support them. Let them be who they want to be. I guarantee you, 10 times out of 10, they're going to make you happier, and they're going to be happier. It might not be what you had planned for them. I was a firefighter when my kids were growing up. I thought for sure that Adam was going to be on the BRT by now. I was positive he was going to go out and become a firefighter. And he didn't. And I couldn't be more proud of the work that he's doing trying to become a voice actor, and trying to get his stuff there, because my son is happy. He's going for something he wants to do. He wouldn't have been happy as a firefighter. He wouldn't have been happy, running into burning buildings. Happy making content and making people laugh and entertaining people. And for me, supporting him doing that, supporting his happiness is more important than anything else in the world.
I mean, for me, I think what you're doing with your children is one of the more important things as well. Just that support. Like having that support means that they have a foundation to where they can take a risk and they can try something that they really enjoy doing in life. And I think that so many people don't have that. And I think you giving that to your children, like that's a hats off. That's a major kudos to you.
No, I thank you for that. But I think that that's just how parents should be. I think that our job is to nurture and guide and support, but it's not to direct, and it's not to order, and it's not to command.
Agreed.
We have to let them grow into who they are going to be, not who we want them to be. And, when it comes to these imaginary lines that we put in the sand for everybody else, those imaginary lines are for yourself. And you need to apply them to yourself. And you need to look at yourself in the mirror and go, this is the standard that I say this is supposed to be to. Do I meet that standard? Because if I don't meet the standard, how can I apply the standard to you? You know,
Exactly. This is
yeah.
you're gonna end up being a regular on here. Because
It
when
sounds
I go
like it
over
because we
parenting, yeah.
we get rolling with this, and every time I see you post something up, and you're like, "Hey, I'm going to talk about this topic," I'm like, you know what? We had such a good conversation last time. Let's do it again.
Yeah, and I mean, realistically, if you ever see me post anything, and this goes vice versa, literally, just consider yourself included. Like, because in reality, there are a lot of topics I wanna go over. I wanna go over parenting. I wanna go over race. Like, I wanna go over the left versus the right in terms of politics, and you're a person I'm gonna be tapping on the shoulder to see if you have availability to do it.
Oh,
Like, I can guarantee you that.
anytime, Larry, you want me, let me know. I'll make myself available because I don't cover these topics in my podcast. I try to avoid them simply because it's not a comfortable conversation, but these are conversations that need to be had. These are words that need to be listened to. And, having these conversations with you, sitting down with you, and having these conversations and getting it out here and getting down to the nitty gritty of it, having disagreements, having a discourse, and then coming to an understanding. This is what we need to be doing in the halls of Washington. This is what we need to be doing in our neighborhoods. This is what we need to be doing at work. This is what we need to be doing with our family, because this is how we grow. This is how we become better. So I want to thank you again for the opportunity, because just being here with you and doing this, love it. And anytime, I'll be rearing and ready to go.
Sounds good. Now, before we get out of here, I would like you to go ahead and again plug your pod, plug your socials, plug anything that you have out there. Let the people know how to find you.
Easiest way to find me is to go to thecarolinastoryteller.com altogether, thecarolinastoryteller.com. You'll get the podcast, Let Me Tell You a Story. You'll get a link to my blog. You'll get a link to all of my socials. You'll get to see my merch. You'll get to see my books, and you'll get to see reviews. And of course, episodes like where I do this, they're going to be posted on there too. So you can go and see great presenters like Larry, who have had me on their show, and let me talk to them. So remember, thecarolinastoryteller.com. Check it out, and see you there.
Looking forward to it again. Thank you so much for being a guest today. We're pretty good to go. I'm going to end the recording here. And I just hope you enjoy the rest of your day. It's funny, like I've been hearing and watching all my emails start to pile up for work. So I'm going to go get to that. But Thank you again. Amazing opportunity to speak with you as always.
Yeah, it was definitely great to be here with you, and I really appreciate you having me back on. And when we do this next time, it's going to be just as fun.
Looking forward to it, my friend. You enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye
Bye-bye.
bye.